Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Kalicube Tuesdays. I'm Jason Barnard, the brand SERP guy, and today I'm with Chase Neely. Welcome, Chase.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely delighted. You get the song. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Chase Neely.
Can't get any better than that. Thank you.
Delightful. We're going to be talking about, is your personal brand killing your business? And this is super important for us at Kalicube because we're going to launch a podcast, as we'll see at the end of the show, about growing your personal brand. It's something we're now focusing on. And what we wanted for the final episode before we take a short hiatus with this particular podcast, we wanted your expert opinion, Chase, on why this is so important, how it works, what to do, because that's where we're going to be going with our podcast. But before that, is your personal brand killing your business? We're going to look at your knowledge panel. And I'm sorry to embarrass you very slightly, but your knowledge panel is there. It exists. Google understands who you are, but it hasn't got a hugely detailed knowledge of who you are. And it doesn't see you as incredibly authoritative. Not a criticism, because I think this is the case for most people. You have the material out there, you simply haven't joined the dots for Google. And Google's not understanding, not because you're not credible and authoritative and trustworthy and impressive and important, but because you haven't joined the dots for the machines, which are relatively simplistic. And just really quickly, if anybody wants to learn more about knowledge panels, brand SERPs, and building your personal brand, sign up for the Kalicube newsletter. You'll learn how to educate Google, which is exactly what we would be doing here, is taking what exists, packaging it for the machine, so the machine, Google, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Microsoft Bing, understand who you are, what you do, which audience you serve, and why you're credible. So, Chase, is that something you think you will now do?
Well, yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting that we have this topic, Jason, because this is something I talk about with all sorts of thought leaders. And the cobbler's son has no shoes in that old metaphor, right? And I think that it's certainly something I should focus on. And my business partner and I both have just started to emphasize our own personal brands this year. So that's an I to dot and a T to cross for my homework after this show.
100%. And the really lovely thing is that the material exists out there. You're doing a very smart job, but Google hasn't joined the dots, and it's up to you to intentionally go out there and help this machine join the dots. But less about that and more about, is your personal brand killing your business? What I hear from you is a personal brand that's either working for you or working against you. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's almost like a culture in a company. Your company has a culture whether you know it or not, and it's either going to work for your company or it's going to work against your company, from recruiting to customers to getting new clients to making revenue ultimately, which is what we're trying to do. And in the same way, your personal brand is doing that, whether you're running a business, whether you're writing books, or whether you're just an employee at a corporation. Your personal brand is what people think about you, and what people think about you has a critical impact on who you become and where you end up. So yeah, it's absolutely working for you or against you. And unless you're intentional, you don't know which one it is.
Right. Okay. So I got the impression that if you're not intentional, it's definitely working against you. That's not necessarily the case.
It doesn't have to be. I think that what you can see from even my personal brand SERP, it's not working for me on Google. It's working for me in other places, right? Because I've been intentional in other places. But if you're not, I guess if you're not intentional, it's luck. It's luck if it works for you, you know. But if you're intentional and you're taking the steps and you're doing the things like working with Kalicube to make sure that your personal brand's working for you, then yeah, you're being intentional about making that an asset and the asset that it should be.
Right, which is a really important point, because when you say working against you, one always thinks about negative press, the reputation problem, but you're not talking about a reputation problem when it's working against you.
No, it's just not doing what it could do. It's an opportunity cost.
Right. Okay. Missed opportunity, I could be doing much, much better. And what we talk a great deal about at Kalicube is that we can take what exists and amplify it to make you more impressive in front of your audience, both in Google, but also across your entire digital footprint. One thing you talk about is how can we allow our message to pierce the white noise of the internet? I like the idea of the white noise of the internet because we're so overwhelmed. How do we get through that as a personal brand?
There's one core way I treat my personal brand and the people that I work with. I treat it as a business. What does a business have to cut through? It has a unique selling proposition that's built on its mission statement. And so I think from a personal standpoint, each one of us has a reason that we're here. We have a mission statement. Whether it's amplifying, like you mentioned just before, that's actually a common thing that we have at Leverage Brands. We amplify as well. But why do we do that? We amplify thought leaders to make sure that their message reaches as many people as possible online. And then my personal mission statement would be further along that path. I help creators reach their full potential. And so your personal brand needs that mission statement so that you're aligned, and that alignment creates a tip of the spear that goes out through that white noise.
Right. So it's finding the right places to be and the right things to say to the right people wherever it is online. And you're talking about both amplifying what exists and creating new presence content in order to move forwards and grow. So I think one of the mistakes that people make is to underestimate the fact that they can amplify what they already have. And what they have in their head is, oh, I understand that I'm a super expert, but they don't communicate it.
Yeah. And I've also found, Jason, it's they don't give themselves credit for what they've accomplished.
Oh, right.
And so they don't have that looking back, especially the high achievers that I've worked with. They look forward all the time. It's what's next, not what have I done. And so if we can kind of pull those threads together toward that mission statement to reach that core audience that you mentioned, wherever they are online, then you can build the right kind of content to do that so that each piece of content has a higher impact. Because the worst thing to happen is those thought leaders start building the content with no plan. Yeah. And you've seen that too. What happens? It's just out there and they don't know why it's not working. You got to have intentional content that's going to pierce the noise with your core message to the right people.
So one of the huge aspects is to focus in on the right action at the right time.
Yeah.
And one of the huge mistakes is that people forget the past and move forwards and start thinking, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And something you can do and we can do at Kalicube is take that step back and look at it and say, well, you have all of this and you're not making the most of it.
That's right. And, like with me, when I think about my personal brand, this is hard because it's hard to step on the other side of the table and look at your own personal brand, right? I think that when I look at my personal brand, which is hard to do because we're on the opposite side of the table, right? You're looking like from a 30,000 foot view down at your personal brand. What you have to discover is how all of those pieces kind of combine in a way. You got to find that thread throughout. And with that thread, you can start to weave a tapestry really of a story that you're telling to your core audience. And that's what we have to try to do, even looking at ourselves. How have these things that I have done become what I want them to become so that they can reach the people I want to reach today? And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do by yourself, especially because what ends up happening is you either keep looking forward toward what's next and you forget about what you've pushed behind, or, and maybe even worse, you keep doing what you've always done, expecting the same results. And that doesn't work either. You have to continually reinvent for the right impact with the right content at the right time.
Right. No, there are multiple super interesting points in there. Number one is that you're creating to get to your audience, and I've got lots of balloons going off, which is delightful. You're creating to get to your audience, and it's a mess because you're not intentional. And a machine like Google will simply not understand, which is why at Kalicube we use Google to understand what the mess looks like and how we can correct it, because the machine will understand something that's organized, the well-woven tapestry that you talked about earlier on. And the other is that the world is changing all the time. And repeating the same things you've done previously or copying somebody else is not the best strategy. The best strategy is to do what works for your particular niche. And what we do at Kalicube is use the 2 billion data points we have in our database to understand what Google perceives the world to want. So Google can actually template what's going on right now, which are the important sources. And that way we can be very intentional about it. From your position, though, you come from a great deal more experience than we do over the years of implementing these strategies. Do you find that things that worked previously still work today, generally speaking, and things that work in one niche will continue to work in that niche?
No.
Oh,
I don't find that. I think that what I find that does work are the mindset foundational pieces.
right.
So authenticity works,
Hmm.
right? We know that if you're authentic to your message, that's going to work. That's going to cut through. I know that when you talk to your audience and you develop your product from that conversation, that works. But that's not tactic based. When I was starting out, Facebook was still sending your posts to everybody who liked your page, right? That's when I started out in digital marketing. So it has changed. Those tactics have changed. And sometimes you just got to give yourself a chance, because sometimes you don't know what's going to hit, what's going to be viral, what's going to cause hundreds of thousands of subscribers. You just have to be consistent and then continually measure against what has been done so that you can pivot toward what needs to be done in the future.
And how do you feel about the approach to say, well, let's see what might be viral today and let's try doing that, i.e. riding the wave? Is that a bad idea or a good idea?
I think it's probably, I'm going to lean on my lawyer experience here. It depends. If you've ever heard a lawyer say that, it makes you roll your eyes, but it truly does, because it depends on the intention. If you're doing the viral thing to be viral, it probably isn't going to work. If you're doing the viral thing in a way that's authentic to your brand, it might work. And so you can chase those viral trends and do something that's authentic to who you are as a brand. And that might actually work. One of the companies I love to watch is Mischief.
Right.
They spell it differently. Of course, they don't have any vowels because they're too cool for that, which is fine. But I love that they sit down at a table and they just brainstorm what's a viral idea? What would get us the most press? What would get us the most notoriety? What would get us the most fame? That's their brand, to chase viral. Right? And so it works for them. But if I'm sitting here, and we worked with a CMO who was trying to develop his personal brand, and he was like, I want to do this TikTok challenge. Why do you want to do this TikTok challenge? It doesn't square with the brand that you're trying to build. Now, if you can square those two things, let's do it. But if you can't, let's be intentional about the content to reach your people, not just the people.
Brilliant point. And here's a question. You sometimes say personal brand, and sometimes you just say brand. Is there a difference, or are you trying to push home that a personal brand is actually just another brand and it should be treated as such?
I love when personal brand was kind of introduced as a concept. They said YOU Inc. That was how they introduced it as a concept. It was You Inc., You Incorporated. And I love that because it tells you that a personal brand is a business. It is your representation of yourself to the world. And I don't care if you're making money or off of your personal brand from thought leader products, digital products, whatever it is, books, speaking engagements. That's fine. You have a personal brand for sure. But I want to tell everybody they have a personal brand. Regardless of what your context is, you have a personal brand. And it's important to build that, because that's the only thing you take with you from corporate America to your freelancing gig, or from one job to the next. That personal brand follows you. So build it intentionally now so that it becomes an asset to you in the future.
So we have no choice. We have a personal brand, whether we like it or not. And intentionally managing that personal brand is foundationally important to our career at whatever level we are in the corporate hierarchy or in the world of entertainment, depending on which particular area we're focusing on. And for me, I think about self-determination. I look at Google, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Microsoft Bing. I don't want to leave it up to them to decide who I am. I want to intentionally decide who I am and encourage them, educate them to understand my point of view and represent me my way. How do you feel about that?
You're exactly right. That's exactly how we should be thinking about it. We want to craft it so that we can use it in the way that we want to use it, right? And that
Right.
personal brand is the piece. It's the thing that you have to take with you. It's who you are. It's like, I think about even looking at you, you have this guitar on the back wall. So I am learning about you as a person just from the way that you're crafting your Zoom background.
Right.
And it's that intentional. It's that intentional. Are you going to be the one with the blurry background on your office call? Or are you going to be the one who intentionally has something on your shelf, like maybe your book on your corner or your brand on your wall or whatever it is, to let people know a little bit about you? But that personal brand is critical. You have to have it, and you have to craft it, and you have to teach it.
Yeah, you have to teach your audience and these machines. And the audience is the primary focus, from what I understand from your perspective. I need to get through to my human audience, and the machines are simply an interface or an intermediary between me and my audience. And I simply need to get those machines to connect me to my audience, and they become, somewhere along the lines, the most important influencer out there.
Yeah.
They have billions of conversations with micro niche audiences about potentially the topic we're talking about, and we want them to present us to the subset of their users who are our audience. They're the ultimate influencer.
That's right. Well, and I think that for us, that's why we try so desperately to build brand ecosystems.
Oh, brilliant.
We want to have a brand, we work with a guy named Jerry Jenkins. He teaches writers how to write. We want those people's email addresses so that we can continually communicate with them. Whereas, he's ranked number 1 for how to write a book for years, but as that search volume, not just the search ranking, but the search volume is drastically reduced because of ChatGPT or AI or whatever is coming down the pike, we still have this list of hundreds of thousands of people who at one point have said, I want to hear from him. And because we've built that brand ecosystem, we have an asset now that's outside of the machine's influence. So you want to have the machine speaking for you and talking for you, and then eventually to have something that you control so that you can continue to build your personal brand and grow your personal brand and monetize it in a way that it works for you.
And that's a huge, huge, huge point. Build your digital ecosystem, get the machines to represent and recommend you, but make sure you've built your own manner of communicating with your audience. So my next question is, what are the key strategies for building a personal brand? Obviously, that's a very generic question, and it's going to depend. It will depend. What are the key strategies I will be looking at, though, from a very high-level perspective?
From the beginning, it has to be about who you are. So it has to be authentic to you. That's why we always recommend you start with your core message, which is that mission statement. How are you going to help the people? Your core audience. So who are those people that you're going after? And then your core values. And we borrow that from the business world. These core values are the guardrails that are going to tell you how you are going to actually implement on the tactics to build your personal brand. And so you might be willing to do some things that other people might not be willing to do because of your core values, or vice versa. We got to know that because it's got to be authentic to who you are. Now, with those 3 things, you can do any strategy or tactic or anything else that you want to do. But you have to start with the foundational pieces so that you're building a house that fits you. That's right. Who you become.
And how do you match that to the channels you choose? I mean, there are so many channels we can choose from. So I have my core values, I have my message, I know who I'm talking to. How do I figure out what are the channels?
So there's a guy named Ramit Sethi who has a great personal brand. It's I will teach you to be rich. I don't know if you've run across him. He's a big financial influencer here in the US. But one thing that he said in his book was his father took them to fish. And he took them out to the lake. And do you know where he went to fish? He went to the spout in the lake where the fish came in, like they were stocked from the spout.
Right.
You fish where the fish are. So if I'm making a platform decision on what platform to go after for a personal brand, I'm going to go where the people are. Where is your core audience living? They could be on Reddit. They could be on Quora. They could be on Facebook. They could be on TikTok. I don't care where it is. We can develop a strategy on any platform. but it has to be a platform where your people are.
Right. I mean, I love the fish analogy. I always say stand where your audience is looking,
That's right.
which
That's
is,
good too.
well, it's kind of empty, but fish where your fish jumping through the entrance to the river is absolutely more meaningful to me. Now, next question is, how long does it take? I think people tend to get impatient.
It's 100% true. The same CMO influencer that we were working with, he wanted 1,000 followers on Instagram, which it was just a number that he wanted. Great, we can make that happen. And we got about 100 posts in, and he was at 400 something followers. And he said, when are we going to get to 1,000? What are we going to do to get to 1,000 faster? I said, well, we can look at the numbers. It's going to take every post, you get about 4 followers. So we have 114 or whatever it was, more posts to get you to 1,000. So you can run the data to know exactly how long it's going to take to do something once you get traction. If you don't have any traction, then it takes longer to even find that traction to get moving. But people don't want to wait, and they don't put in the effort and consistency over time. And because of that, they don't build the personal brand they could. You have to have that persistence. And that's what really changes the tide between success and failure.
Well, I mean, that also brings me to the question of what KPIs should we be looking at? Because 1,000 followers on Instagram doesn't necessarily mean anything.
No, it doesn't. And we told him that, but it was still important to him. And so I think there's a couple of ways to look at KPIs. One is what drives the bottom line for your business. So what's the revenue driver for your business? But there's a higher level KPI for personal brands specifically, and that's what's going to keep me invested in doing this for longer.
Oh, I like that.
It's that interior win. For him, 1,000 followers was an interior win. It was a nice to have. So if we can check that off, then he's going to continue to invest in his personal brand, right? And so I think that you have to balance those two things for sure, but you have to have things that keep you going and things that are going to build your business, which is that revenue driver on the bottom line.
No, I love that idea. Obviously, we're all looking to drive our businesses, but remaining engaged, remaining on board, keeping that consistency that you talked about earlier on is hugely important. If we lose that traction, if we lose that enthusiasm, nothing is ever going to happen. So we need those KPIs, even if they are meaningless, to keep us on board, because the meaningful one is driving business. And that's the longer term goal, which is going to be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line.
That's right. Yeah. We say you got to come back to your why. Why are you doing this? And maybe that's where the KPI comes from. But chase a vanity metric if you want to, if you know it'll keep you going. And we do call them vanity metrics, even for ourselves.
No, I love that because it's very pragmatic, and it's something I tend to say, oh, let's not go for that. It's a vanity metric. But actually, if it keeps you going, what does it matter? Whether it's vanity or whether it's realistic or whether it's helpful. Next is, how much does it cost? Because I think people think it's all free, don't they?
It can be free, but you have to trade that time for money, right? So you can pay somebody to do it for you, and we're not cheap. Jason, I'm sure working with you is not cheap, because we have gone through the wars and the experience, and we've done this. We have proven track record, and so it's not cheap to work with us. And can you do it yourself? Sure, but you're going to go through the 10 years of experience that we've gone through. Across the board, failing. And can you pick yourself back up every time? So when we get called is either when somebody has money enough to pay us from the get-go because they recognize they don't want to trade that time for money, or after it's failed and they call us in to fix it.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, which is lovely. I want to buy back my time.
Right.
I want to reduce the friction, the stress, and the frustration of doing it myself. I want to avoid making the mistakes that I would make if I just did it myself. And I want to make sure that we're on a clear, consistent path that's actually going to work. And I think one of the key things he said is, I want somebody to motivate me. So somewhere along the line, we're both coaches.
That's right. Yeah, there's an accountability piece to it for sure.
Right. Brilliant. Wonderful. Now, next thing is, I talk a lot about Google. Relying on Google, let me bet my bottom dollar, bad idea.
Relying on Google alone. How about that?
Yep.
Yeah. I think the future of marketing is omnichannel. What you saw in the digital marketing agencies over the last 8-9 years was super specialization. So you had somebody who was really good at Facebook ads, or somebody who was really good at YouTube marketing, Instagram, Google, SEO, whatever it was. You had the individual agencies. The future, I think, is an omnichannel agency who's pulling levers on the different platforms so that you can continue to grow regardless of what happens.
Right,
And that's,
which
yeah,
means
go ahead.
identifying the right platforms for each individual so that we can grow it, so that you're not building a one-legged stool or a one-legged table. You're building a table or a stool with 15 legs, at
That's
which point
right.
if one leg falls off, no
No
problem.
big deal. Yeah. I remember we had a great SEO guy for a really long time. He actually went and started his own agency, and we love him. He did such good work for us. And I kept asking him the question. I said, okay, and what happens when Google SEO is gone? And he would say, it's not gonna go anywhere. I said, yeah, I understand that. But what if it did? What are we doing in place of it? And so we ended up building a huge YouTube following. We ended up building
Right.
in our Facebook. We ended up building in all these different places, not because we had to at the moment, but because we knew at some point we would need the extra legs to the stool that you mentioned. And so
Right.
it's always a good question to say, what if my number one traffic source goes away? What if my number one client's gone? How am I going to replace that? And that's the
Right.
pipeline you have to build.
Well, I mean, one of the things is that Google, let's take Google, it reflects the world's opinion of you. It reflects what's happening in the real online world, whatever channel it might be. And our experience at Kalicube has been, when we implement the Kalicube process, which is this omni-channel approach, it's 80% not Google. Google is 20%, and it's a great 20%, but the focus is always on the owned YouTube channel, the LinkedIn, the Forbes, the search engine land, and that's what's bringing us visibility and getting people to start looking for us on Google and start looking around the topic on Google. And the next thing is, what if Google goes away? That's now a real question because of ChatGPT, Bing, and Perplexity are all moving into this space, and Google Gemini is not currently making waves. What if Google does go away? How do we deal with these AI assistive engines, as we call them?
I think the big thing is make hay now. If you haven't started working on your personal brand, get on this podcast series that Jason's about to do and get working on it. Because now is the time to use what these legacy, or they're going to be legacy systems, are to your benefit. And to build that brand ecosystem so that you can adjust and adapt. But if you don't do it now, you're not going to be in the game.
Which is brilliant, because it is the legacy system. Building a solid personal brand ecosystem is exactly what drives all of these AI assistive engines, because they're trying to understand the world so that they can have a conversation with their users that makes sense to their users, to solve the problems for their users. And if you don't have your personal brand digital ecosystem in place, they cannot understand who you are. They cannot understand that you're credible, and they cannot understand who you can serve. And getting involved in the conversation between these AI assistive engines and their users, understanding credibility, deliverability are the three fundamental things that you need to deal with. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm actually going to skip the last question, because you've just introduced the personal branding podcast that we're going to launch, which is Grow Your Personal Brand with Jason Barnard. We're going to launch that in the summer of 2024, where I will teach you exactly how to grow your personal brand online using the Kalicube process, where you will stand where your audience is looking, demonstrate your credibility, give them the content they need when they need it on the platform that they are hanging out on, and then communicate that to the search and assistive engines like Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Bing Copilot, Perplexity, and even Google Search, so that they can recommend you to the subset of their users who are your audience. That makes total sense. We're going to do 50 episodes, 5 minutes each, step by step, how to manage your personal brand and grow your personal brand. Could you possibly pass the baton to me, Chase?
It would be my pleasure, because I will be tuning in as well to learn how to grow my personal brand with Jason Barnard. So you better join us and watch these podcasts, because they are going to just help accelerate something that needs to be done today. Now is the time to invest in your personal brand And there is no better way than to listen to Grow Your Personal Brand with Jason Barnard.
Brilliant. Seize the day, grasp the opportunity. Now is the time. Don't delay. Thank you so much, Chase. That was absolutely brilliant. It was a wonderful end to this current part of our series. We're going to take a hiatus for 3 or 4 months. Thank you so much for closing this out with us. And you get the outro song for the last time before the end of the year. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Chase. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Kalicube. It's all about your brand SERP.